Hello, I'm Neal Romanek. I'm editorial director at The Flint, and this panel is how to create a sustainable studio. And having said that, Matt Snow from KitPlus is running over and is going to get plastic bottles of water that we are going to be drinking from. So ignore the plastic bottles. We didn't plan ahead for refillables, but I'm sure you won't find any plastic bottles at these studios, right?
No.
No, okay. Anyway, thanks very much. We're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk a bit about the studio sustainability standard that Albert is running for the second year, and the process of getting studios, not just in the UK, but in the US as well, to adopt sustainable practices and become really useful hubs for sustainable production. And it's a process. It's something that's going to continue, and we're never going to get it perfectly, or we're never going to get it perfect. We're going to, have to keep iterating and doing better and better and better as far as sustainability goes. The Flint, where I come from, is a new publication. We're a month old. We're at theflint.media, and we cover sustainability across the entire media industry. So that's from script to, thank you, Matt. We don't have plastic bottles. We've got metal, which is much better. But anyway, we cover sustainability from script to distribution and across all sectors. So film, TV, games, news, sports. We found that there are a lot of silos in sustainability, and we're trying to create a place where people can share best practice and put all their stuff out on the table and share solutions, because nobody knows everything in sustainability. And if we did, we wouldn't be where we are now. We need to be sharing ideas, sharing research, and kind of encouraging each other. So with that, I'm going to ask these amazing guests to introduce themselves, and we'll get into the discussion. So Lesley, do you want to start out with you?
I don't know if you can hear me. Hello, everyone. My name is Lesley Marr. I'm from a company feeding back. A company called NXTGENbps. We are a big UK distributor for battery generators, so sustainable power for productions, events, and anything that you might need power for, to avoid using diesel generators or HVO generators. So we're quite new to the market, but we're not new to the broadcast industry. We've been working in TV and film for around 20 years. So we know everyone quite well, hopefully. That's me.
Great. Oh, I'm very loud. Yeah, is that okay? Is that a bit better? Hi everyone, I'm Florence Mansfield. I sit in the climate change team at Arup. Arup are a global engineering and design company. And the kind of reason why I'm here, I've been supporting on the studio standard, which I know we're going to talk about a bit today. Arup are the technical organisation helping Albert with the kind of creation and delivery of the studio standard.
Hi, I'm Mark Lewis, and I'm from BBC Studioworks Limited. So we're a part of the BBC, but the important part of that is that we're a commercial part of the BBC. We operate out of a number of sites, and last year we submitted our entry for the BAFTA Albert Studio Sustainability Standard for Television Centre. So it's the old BBC building in W12 in West London. We operate some 3 studios now out of the former complement. The whole site's been redeveloped. We left site in 2013 and then returned in August 2017. And we've been running pretty much non-stop since then. We host all of ITV Daytime's programmes. I won't list them all. I won't guess your viewing habits, but we do the full raft from 0600 through to the lunchtime news at 13:30. And then that's in 2 of our studios, one of which we turn around on a daily basis over 6 days a week. On the 6th day, being a Sunday, we actually host Sunday Brunch for Channel 4. So I just want to give you a bit of a flavour as to the type of shows that we do from there. And in our largest studio, which is over 10,000 square foot in size, we open that to the market for spot sales. And again, we're not guaranteed any BBC work at all. In fact, it's true to say that we do the majority of our work for non-BBC clients. And we do turnarounds in there. In fact, tonight we're turning around that large studio from a show back into Graham Norton, and then into, if you do watch it, Bake Off, an extra slice on the Friday night into the Saturday, ready for the Sunday TX. And we do that pretty much 24/7. So we're pretty much operating around the clock. Going back to the standard, one of the questions was, what does your operate? How many days a year do you operate? And that was a really easy one to answer. That was 365. So we're 24/7, pretty much 365, over 3 studios. We're really pleased to also add that we've opened a new studio up in Glasgow, Kelvin Hall, and my colleagues there will also be submitting data for this year's round of studio standards.
Right, yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Julie Hoegh. I'm head of sustainability at Garden Studios. We're located in north West London, Harleston area. We have a footprint of 300,000 square feet, 5 sound stages and 2 virtual production stages. And as far as I know, we're the only B Corp certified studio in Europe. And we also take part in the studio sustainability standard that Albert organizes.
Great. So I'll start with, first of all, I guess tell people a bit about Albert. How many people know what Albert is or have heard of Albert? So just a handful. So Albert, I worked actually at Albert for the first 6 months of this year as the head of comms. But Albert is an organization that is part of BAFTA, that is the key organization, you could say, for film and TV sustainability, and also has a carbon calculator that productions use worldwide, basically. It's kind of the gold standard for carbon calculators for production. They do a wide variety of initiatives around biodiversity, studios. They do a project called the Green New Deal, which is being trialed in Wales about transforming specific industries, in this case, transforming the Welsh industry and making it more sustainable. There's a lot of different stuff that they do. And the Studio Sustainability Standard, and Flo can tell us more about this, was rolled out about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In partnership with Arup, and was a way to create benchmarking for studios around sustainability, correct? Can you tell us a bit more about that and kind of how Arup's part in it and how you kind of got connected with Albert and how all that happened?
Of course. So I guess, Arup have worked with Albert for a number of years now, so Green New Deal, as you said, and the transformation plan in Wales. Arup kind of support with all of that, mainly myself leading that. But I guess, so to just bring a bit of context, I guess one of the biggest challenges in the industry is around data collection and understanding the size of the problem. Often with sustainability, sort of we have a lot of ideas of what to do, but it's really hard to understand what will have the biggest impact, and also the current impact that we're having at the moment. So the studio standard came about as a way of bringing to the industry this one consolidated place that studios could record and report data, sustainability data, and understand their impact, and then also a way for us to give them advice and guidance on how to get better. There are lots of other examples in the wider world, the kind of construction world. So there's LEED and BREEAM and lots of sort of wider standards, but there's nothing that's specifically for studios. And they're a very unique place and organization, the way they interact with productions and their supply chain. And so we felt that something specific to studios would be most sort of helpful. So we had about 6 months sort of piloting and working with studios to understand exactly what they, how they operated, the data that they created, the kind of the activities that they had on site. And we piloted this with a number of studios, both in the UK and the US, before the kind of first year of the studio standard was born. So I know both of you were involved in the studio standard. We were really pleased. We got a good number of studios who came forward. We kind of worked with them to be able to complete this standard because it's really rigorous. And the topics included in it, so it's climate, circularity, nature, people, and management. Is that right? Off the top of my head, I've got it right. So they're the 5 topics. And the idea is it's not just environmental data, so it's not just your fuel and your water and your kind of energy, but it's your people and the spaces that you have, the kind of social aspects to your studio, which is all part of sustainability. So we've done this first year. It's been great, I think. Obviously, your first year, you always discover some little improvements you can make, or studios also, I should say, are so varied in the way they work and their size and everything like that. So it's really challenging to make one standard that works for all of them. But yeah, we're now moving into our second year, hopefully with an even greater number of studios. And I think, so far it's been a success and really helped us understand sort of the state of play at the moment in the industry.
What? So then are you literally going into Studioworks and Garden Studios with a clipboard, and sort of looking, while they look nervously on, and you're putting red marks on things, or what actually is the whole process like? And maybe you guys can also.
Well, if you start,
talk
and
about
I can add what we've done. Yeah.
So the way that we did it, so it's really rigorous. The tool that you have to input your data in, and you have to provide justification and evidence for everything you include. We then had a whole process of sort of engaging with studios, helping them answer things that weren't clear, where they didn't necessarily have the data, sort of working through that process with them. The studios then provide all the evidence that they have for the data that they've included. And I think, like a lot of other standards, so I say BREEAM and LEED, they do not go around with a clipboard at every single site. It's about providing evidence, and you can get audited. So a small number of studios will be audited, and sort of based off that, we get an understanding of the sort of level of accuracy that studios are submitting data with. I think maybe in the future that could be something, as this thing gets wider and bigger in the industry, that's something that could be looked at. But I think for this initial stage, the approach is that of collaboration and trust and rigorous, rather than sort of checking and looking for mistakes.
Yeah. So what was the process like for you guys, and kind of maybe, and if you want to start, tell us about Studioworks, but and also kind of where you started in terms of like, well, we're sustainable and we're fine, or what was that? What was it like before and then coming into it?
Okay, sort of beforehand, well, really just to emphasise, we operate out of a building that was open. In fact, it celebrated its 60th birthday this year, so it's only slightly older than me by a couple of years. So we're really working from an environment that's already the built environment, and it's worldwide known as being as the first television centre in the world. And clearly, it's a building that's very much typical of its era in the 1960s. So what I mean by that, there's an awful lot of concrete there. And I have to say, we probably struggled on the nature sort of element of it in particular. And just to emphasise as well, we're not the landlord of the site, although we are very much in control of our part of the building, which enabled us to enact and fill out a lot of the data ourselves without resorting back to asking the landlord for data. What I would say initially, some of the terminology, given it's already been outlined, that it's for a wide range of both studios and stages, some of the terminology for us was a little bit alien in that we operate multi-camera studios and not stages. And with that, we like to feel that we provide a full service to productions. So that's everything from kit, very apt being here, and crew as well as the infrastructure within the building as well. So so some of the terminology, as I said, probably we struggled with a little bit at first, but I think we got there in terms of the definitions, and we know, what we're responsible for and what productions are responsible for. In terms of data collection, harvesting, that was pretty easy for us. The internal part of the building, we've got a monitor on everything. However, we are given the constraints of, as I say, a building that was designed in the late 50s and opened sort of 60 years ago this year, really. So, that was probably the major challenge, was our built environment.
Yeah, it is, because as you were saying, each studio has kind of got its own little quirks, and you may own the building, you may not own the building, and it sounds like each case is almost its own very different case. So what about garden studios? Was that?
Yeah, no, we are also in existing buildings, so this has been a challenge for us, and we rent most of them. So there's you can try to push the landlord to do certain things, and some of them are happy to go along. But for us, I mean, we probably have a slightly different setup in that we rent space. We don't rent, we don't have the gear or the people. And one of the challenges that we have is that, to convince productions to do this, to adapt. And there's quite a few requirements in the standard that, they want you basically to convince the production to do it. And we're finding that is quite difficult, because they feel that they're renting our space and they shouldn't we shouldn't interfere in how they run their business. So that's one thing that's challenging. But what I would say is that the studio standard has been hugely helpful for me internally, in that I could go to a meeting and say, this is what Albert wants, we need to do it. And it's no longer what I want, but it was what Albert wants. So that's been hugely helpful. I think it's a great initiative, and I think it's going to be good for the industry.
It does help to be able to say, oh, I'm sorry,
I'm just
it's not
messing
my
with it.
idea,
Exactly.
as long as you can tell somebody else that it's,
That's right.
But then, so Lesley, talking about, Julie's talking about productions coming in and they're not kind of we just want to do things our way.
Mm-hmm.
What has it been like with the productions that you are talking to? And I know a lot of the
Yep.
things that you're offering them now are, these green generators, or emissions-free generators. But what is the appetite like?
The appetite
there?
it's interesting. The appetite is there, but the action isn't quite there yet. So I think everyone's thinking about it and is being prompted by, I think the broadcasters are great, because they've set themselves goals now, and they've set their desires. So they are kind of putting pressure on their productions to be more sustainable. So it's a bit of a sort of supply chain process that is a little bit slow, but I think it's starting to move now. And it's challenging for the hire companies who, big location companies, have got huge fleets of diesel generators that they've had probably running for 10, 15 years. They might have changed them over to HVO fuel, which is one step as a transition towards being greener. But in fact, it isn't actually doing that much benefit. So they really do need to kind of take the next step. And there are barriers. There's a culture barrier. I think it's a change management piece. A lot of the industry is aware of the need to make changes, but reluctant, because they're very happy with the way that they work at the moment. They don't want to change things. I'm sure you can see that when you have productions coming in, and so there is a sort of education piece that needs to happen. That really people need to understand the benefits of using different technologies and different power systems, understanding how they can use less power as opposed to just throwing a 20 kilowatt generator in the corner and leaving it to run. It's a different way of working. So I think people are a bit like productions, it's too much hassle for me at the moment. I haven't got enough people to worry about that. I need to focus on the shoot and not my power. So there needs to be a bit of a shift in the way of working. And I think that's the biggest challenge, actually.
Yeah.
The technology is becoming more cost effective, more advanced, smaller, some fantastic battery options out there for people to use. It's just that education piece and trusting that it's not going to fall over. I mean, the other benefits of using battery generators, of course, is they're silent, pretty much. All you have is a small fan. So you can put your power very, very close to your action. I mean, and there are so many benefits. No cable runs that are not, that are benefits to production as well. So using solar power, saving costs. So there's just a lot of education and a bit of confidence that needs to be built with productions. But it's starting to happen, and I think the broadcasters are really helping, because they're really kind of pushing that agenda. That's where we are with it.
So Flo, we were just chatting earlier about like other industries and how other industries are doing it or doing. So how would you compare how broadcast industry is doing compared to other industries, and also what can we learn, like sort of looking at other what other people are doing, what other industries are doing, what can we adopt?
So I think the film and television industry is very unique. I think that the way in which it operates, with the kind of sort of organizations or groups of people coming together very quickly to create something, and then that being used for maybe potentially months, sort of a year maybe, and then it being taken apart and that group of people disbanding and moving on to something individually, means that there's a very unique challenge with sort of keeping sort of information in circulation, keeping materials in circulation, and it sort of exists in a way that other industries don't do that. So I think when I first started working with Albert and kind of unpicked how it all worked and learned about sort of the relationship between productions and studios, I was like, oh my God, this whole ecosystem is so complicated and challenging. But I think there are definitely lessons that can be taken from other industries. I think other industries that are further ahead in that journey. So, for example, we were talking about the construction industry, which operates in the same way, but I just think has a much longer timeline. Buildings are built for hundreds of years, not months. But you can look at the way that stakeholders engage with each other, the agreements that they have, the kind of way that decisions are taken across the whole life cycle of something. So when thinking about the end of life, so now we're at a point, say, in the construction industry, where we think about the end of life at a building right at the beginning, and we design it effectively with that in mind. You've heard terms like design for disassembly and things like that, thinking about circular economy. If we can take that learning and bring it into the film and TV industry, so thinking about designing sets for the end of their life, that could be, a really effective learning.
Are you guys finding that that's kind of a big part of what or at least some part of what you do? Is that education or cheerleading or encouraging?
Florence's point is an important one, because we have had productions where we have, without mentioning names, big companies with very strong sustainability policies. But when you put together a team of freelancers, they don't necessarily know that the big companies' sustainability policy. There's a disconnect between what the production company wants to achieve and what the freelancers who are kind of thrown together and very busy are willing to do, basically.
And then what about you guys? If you've got the BBC brand stuck on there, I would think you'd be able to...
I think for us, in some ways, it's quite easy in that the productions that we host, provide facilities for, they're mandated to get the commission to adhere to the Albert standard for production as well. So in many ways, sort of we're pushing against an open door. They absolutely want us to have the standard, that's for sure. Certainly line producers and production managers, when they speak to us, or me in particular, and ask, can you help us with our submission? There's a real palpable sigh of relief that we've got this standard. We've also got a zero waste to landfill accredited by the Carbon Trust for Television Centre. So having these really helps them, and it becomes, as I say, both of us pushing against an open door really to achieve what we both as a facilities provider and a production to get the next commission from the major broadcasters. That's what they're required to do as well. So as I say, I won't say that achieving the standard was easy, and I was going to use the word, I suppose, rather than rigorous, perhaps onerous really was a word that came immediately to mind for me. As you'd expect, it's a difficult standard to achieve, and that's what you would want to have really. So for us, in some ways, a little bit easier in that, say, the productions that we host, they need to achieve it as well.
And the idea is, I know that nobody in the standard got the highest mark. So it was, people got, a certain mark, and then the idea is that where you are, and then you know what you can do for next year. So it's an ongoing kind of process. Again, you're not like, okay, that's your standard, and
Yeah, and I'm not too bashful to say that at Studioworks we actually came top out of year one, and we can see where we need to improve on and what our actual mark was and what the real mark was as well, because there were some other factors as well that we just couldn't fulfil. So I'm completing the submission for this year. Still struggling with some of it, I have to say, but there are other areas that I won't say overcompensated for, but as you say, it's not just about the built environment, and it's not just about the buildings. It's about so much more than that as well.
So how do you think, we're talking about that education piece, and we have to, we do have to make changes very, very quickly and much faster really than most people think, I think. So how do you see being able to, or what ideas do you have about sort of talking to the industry and getting people to make those changes quickly? There's education, there's discussion, there's things like this, but what things could be put in place to sort of accelerate that, do you think?
If I could choose, I think financial incentives always seems to work. And apparently in Austria they have a thing where if you participate in the green film standard, which is sort of Albert in Europe, you get a 5% tax break. And that, I think, money always talks, and I think that would be a game changer.
I think, also people, I think, really want to do good and they want to make good decisions. And I think a big part of it is enabling them to do it. So firstly, I guess through the tools and the provision of tools. So things like this standard, or think mechanisms that enable people to sort of actually quantify and come to terms with their impact and the decisions they're making. But then also, I think another thing is really small things around, Sky Studios, they have the kind of carbon associated with all the food choices in the cafeteria. And it's such a small thing, but it's so important because you know how the calories, people then make choices based on calories on menus. When people can see the carbon impact of, a beef curry versus something vegetarian or fish, it really makes people confront their choices. So obviously it's a very complex thing around changing behavior, and there's a lot of different elements within that, but really helping people see their impact rather than if you're blindly just making choices,
Lesley, do you have any ideas about that?
Well, it's a much wider piece, isn't it? And I think it's just looking at everything that you can, and like the food you were saying is a really interesting part of it. And I just think it's all part of the change of habits and the change of culture that people are starting to look at to make that successful. I think I'd like to see more studios taking part as well next year, which I'm sure you'll have, which is brilliant. But I think, like you said, leading from the construction industry, we know that the construction industry are probably much more regulated than our industry, and also they're probably a couple of years ahead in terms of what they're doing, particularly on the power side. So there's lots we can learn from those other industries, and it's great that you're involved with it because you can bring that knowledge into it, which I think is really, really, really helpful.
You had any ideas about?
Yeah, I think it's really important, certainly as a facilities provider, that you can offer tangible results to the productions that are using your facilities. So we have both. We have resident productions that use 2 of our studios, and when they came to Television Centre, we worked collaboratively with them to introduce LED lighting. So we've got 2 of our 3 studios that are 100% LED lighting. Now, apart from that being a great thing, it also means in times of really high utilities bills, we can pass on the absolute savings to them. When they get the bill, they can't quite, the monthly bill, they can't quite believe how low it is. But that was working collaboratively with them, engaging with their lighting director as well, or their lighting directors, to say, this is how we want to achieve the look of the studio, as well as being able to provide you with these lamps. We've also done that in part in our largest studio, but there are an awful lot of hired lamps that come in that we don't choose, lighting directors do as well. So there's still a bit of a legacy of tungsten, probably true to say we're lighting directors of a certain generation, but that's moving on. Again, part of the facilities provision, 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, we introduced compostable waste stream at Television Centre, so working with our on-site catering suppliers. All of the cups, lids, all of the consumables now are compostable. So they go into a separate waste stream there. So again, that adds back into the value that we can give to, as a facility, can give to the productions that are visiting and resident on site. I think having tangible results is really necessary.
And that's, when you're working with I guess you're working with studios, so you could be having these conversations with them about kind of what to bring in.
Absolutely. And I think we were talking about there's a lot of studios that are being built now that are great. They have solar panels on the roof, and they are using those solar panels to instead of using grid power. So that's fantastic. It also benefits them in terms of cost savings as well, which all helps. But I think there's other things that they could be doing to, if they've got EV chargers in, to rather than giving back to the grid with the excess that they make in terms of power from the solar panels, is actually benefiting the business more by having rechargeable batteries on site that they can then put out to location, but also then not be using the grid power as much. So it's just work in progress, and I think everyone's starting to think about that now. But there's some really exciting initiatives that I think can be done working with studios. It's not just locations that need power because they can't plug into the mains. There's lots of creative options for using batteries as well.
Well, the next gen, one of them actually uses a car charger, right? You can charge it on a car charger.
Yeah. So you can have a whole row of car chargers in your car park that probably the staff use, hopefully, if they've got EV vehicles. But when they're not being used overnight, you can be charging your batteries up, so that then you can use them on location. And that's just a no-brainer, really. It's a very simple thing. If you've got the batteries there, you can swap them out, you can stack them up, you can daisy chain them so that you can get greater amounts of power. So it's just thinking about how you might use like your EV chargers on site, not just for that, we want staff to charge vehicles up, we want to charge our own vehicles up, but actually thinking a bit outside the box. What else could we do with them? So that there's a lot we can do there. Yeah.
I'm going to throw it open to you guys for questions. This is your chance to. I was going to say somebody's going to come around with a mic, but that's me actually. So, hold on one second, and if you can introduce yourself as well, and probably speak up a bit.
Hi, Tony Franks from Pocket Films. I'm very interested, 1 year in, is there a lot of inquiries from other studios to join the scheme? Is it a trickle or is it a flood of inquiries from other studios?
Yeah, definitely. We've had a huge uptake since the first year. I think some studios obviously very bravely went on the first year when it was new. And I think due to the success and sort of the scores that you got and what that showed about the studio, a lot of other studios have shown interest, and we've actually expanded it in terms of the geography. So the carbon factors that were in the last scorecard were UK based, so we've had to extend them. We've got Canada and further Europe, North America, so we've created these kind of versions for different geographies to make it as inclusive but also as accurate as possible for the second year.
How have you upgraded or changed, I guess, the standards this year over last year? Were there any things that you've improved on, or?
Yeah, I think there were just a couple of topics that were maybe sort of not as clear as they could be, or, we got really valuable feedback from studios saying, it doesn't quite work that way, or, it would be better if it was phrased like this. There was one, it's really important, we wanted to drive sort of studios to have responsibilities for productions that were going on within their studios. That was a really important part of the standard. So it was being specific about, what we award credits for in terms of influencing productions to operate in certain ways. Little changes like that, but nothing fundamental, I don't think.
That's great, because if you get enough studios, not participating makes you look bad. Like, why aren't you participating?
Exactly.
Or having people say, "What's your studio standard rating?"
And if
and
you
not
don't
being
have
able to
one,
say
it's
that,
like, why? Well, why don't you have one? Yeah.
Other questions? I'm going to stand here and do an uncomfortable silence until somebody puts their hand up. So you're all good. You know everything there is to know about sustainability. Everything there is. You're all good. If we come to your house, it's all solar panels and heat pumps. All right, then. Okay, going back here. That's good, because I get to ask more questions. So also, what about, I guess also because you're talking about other territories, you're doing stuff in the US. And I know that here you're talking about Albert, the BBC's, and all the UK broadcasters' mandates to have Albert certification. That here we've got and in Europe you've got this tradition of public broadcasters, so you can have that. The broadcasters have to be responsible to the people, so you can have more of that mandate to, have Albert certification or whatever it is. But in the US, there's none of that, or there's very, very little of that. So I wonder what kind of adoption or not are you seeing in the US or seeing in other places outside of Europe and the UK? Is it a very different landscape, or are they?
With the standard?
Yeah,
With
with
the
the standard and kind of how they're looking at sustainability and how they're practically going about it. 'Cause
Yeah,
they may
so-
not have that push that we feel here.
I think in the States they have specific regulations that they have to comply to. I think they're generally the way the studios work is that the productions and the studios are combined. So the ones that we've worked with, kind of like Warner Brothers and Disney, it's all combined in one big business. So I think it makes reporting, sort of data reporting, much easier and much more straightforward. And I think there's less of a kind of, things fall between the two stools of productions and studios. So I think in terms of their participation, it's difficult to say until we kind of close the drawbridge on this year's applications to see how many have actually come forward. But I think there's a real appetite to do it and a real keenness. And I think, especially in sort of San Francisco and the West Coast, they're seeing, some real severe climate-related natural disasters. And I think there's a real ethos and awareness of climate change and wanting to be part of that, in a positive way. Same with Canada. We have a number of Canadian studios coming on this year and sort of speaking to them about the sort of wildfires and the situations they're going through. It kind of all builds a momentum and sort of wanting to be involved in something for good. I don't know what you guys...
Yeah, I mean, from being part of the initial discussions last year, I have to say, as a participant, it's really interesting listening to the challenges that the studios have in Canada, in particular, as well as on the West Coast, really, with the actual physical climate change in there and being so extreme as well. Perhaps not so influential and sort of definitive for us in sunny West London, but clearly something to think about as well. So it gave a really good broad picture of things and how you sort of fit into that as well as a provider.
Well, there's that. That we have to start thinking about with productions. That we will be getting more disruptions. We know that things are going to get increasingly bouncy or turbulent, and that will have a knock-on effect for supply chains, for finance, for everything that you do, let alone weather. And so, you think of it as long-term thinking, but we may not be long-term thinking. Nobody knows what's going to be happening next year. Do you think about that stuff in terms of planning the business or talking to productions, or, there's maybe only so much you can do, but that seems like that should start being folded into your thinking now.
Yeah, sort of in terms of supply chain, clearly, now that's an area we haven't really spoken about at all, but that clearly, is very much part of the process as well. And we influence, I would say, productions with that, but they choose. Mentioned about lighting higher, for example, that's sort of down to them. The timber that they use, that's down to them. And we do have an offering of that, but it's very much an over-the-counter offering for standby facilities on the day, as opposed to making sets. But once you start having those standards, it gets everyone starting to think about that, and the bar gets raised then at a pretty rapid rate. Has been sort of our observation of that as well.
I think to your point about the effects of climate change on the studio, which was, I think that's what you want. No, we were just talking about it, Florence and I, actually, because one of the points in Albert is you can get a point if you get a climate risk assessment of your facilities. So that's something that we're looking into to see if we're in an area where there's a flooding risk or, which can impact our business negatively. So it's true, it's about mitigation, but also adaptation to find ways to deal with the realities of it.
And then when you're talking to productions, Lesley, is there are they starting to think about the potential climate disruptions and things?
Yes, they are. They are starting to think about it. It's whether they're actually doing anything about it.
Just like bring a raincoat, we'll be fine.
Yeah, there's the Albert production certification, so that's great because that helps as well. But I think, understanding the amount of power that they use for example, on all of their lighting cameras, everything, if they're on location, reporting that data and being made to do that, probably in the same way with the studios for productions, is the Albert standard is forcing that, which is really good. And so then they're beginning to think about, well, actually, I could use less here, or I could do it in a different way. And that's really what they need to do. They need to do it in a different way and be a bit more, there's a lot more planning involved. And again, it is just all comes back to changing the way that they work and thinking about things differently. But so I think they're more aware, definitely. And Albert itself has helped that. But I think we need more things, almost legislation, banning diesel in city centres, that type of thing, to actually really force the change. And we need to see those things come in. I think they will. In certain cities, Paris, for example, the Olympics is happening. So they're going to be banning diesel there, I believe, for that period of time. To do with this, the health of participants in the marathon, for example. If there's a lot of diesel generators pumping out horrible gases when people are trying to perform at their best, it's detrimental. So, but those kind of things would really help as well. But yeah, the standards, for production, I think the studios thing's great, and it's probably come off of the production side, and it needs, the more areas that we can cover with it, the better, because it does make people think and it does force them to change, and that's really what we need. Yeah, I think.
Thank you very much. That was great. And this will be available on the KitPlus website, the video, in the next week or so. And thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.